Been trying a couple of different recording strategies. I've dropped it down to 1080p. The system can handle 1440, but it can't really handle recording at 1440. So I've dropped everything down to 1080p, and this should be a nice smooth run with much fewer micro stutters. And we'll see. I'll either stay with these guys the entire time, or there's a flight of B1s that starts out behind us and eventually overtakes. Well, they actually take a slightly different route and end up ahead of us. So they overtake us, but not in a place that we can see them overtaking. But there will be one stretch in the valley where we can see them ahead of us, so I'll make a decision there and then if we want to go take them or not. Yeah, go fly with them. We'll see. I already flew this run today with clouds and at 1440p, and they were just watching it back. There were just too many micro stutters for it to be enjoyable. That's one, that's two. There they go. So this is X-Plane 11, the stock F4 Phantom, full fuel, 400-pound payload, so very light. Took off out of Whitby. The lead is an F4, and visually 2 and 3 are F-18s, but in actual fact they were just recorded using the F4 Phantom. I'm just playing them back as Hornets for a bit of visual variety. But you don't have to go far on X-Plane to find a military jet that flies well. The F4 actually flies really nicely, I think. It's a little bit too clean. I somehow doubt that you could really get 500 to 600 knots on the deck at such a low power setting. But aside from that, it's good. The F4 is a total dog below 400 knots in the sim at least, so got to keep that in mind. So this run is flown at 500 to 600, mostly in the low 500s. Along VR1350, and then eventually transitioning over to VR1355 for the way back. And even though I've flown this run probably 15 times in the last 2 weeks, it never ceases to amaze me, especially now that I have some new hardware and it's running without any micro stutters, or very few micro stutters even when I'm recording. Never ceases to amaze me how visually stunning this scenery is. Just the changes in elevation are just ridiculous between the ortho scenery, the trees, seeing 2 F-18s. The F-18's my favorite jet in the whole wide world. Seeing 2 F-18s maneuvering in front of me, and again with the micro stutters mostly removed, you actually get a pretty good feeling of speed when you're crossing some of these ridge lines. Just the amount of ground you're covering when you're doing 550 knots is it's pretty crazy. I mean, despite how much I've actually flown in the last couple of days, which is a lot, this is still actually a lot of fun. I'm happy to report. For those that aren't familiar, we are flying this on the PilotEdge network, so you will occasionally hear some ATC in the background. Truthfully, the radios in the F4, the panel, do not work correctly, so it's actually just on whatever frequency I was last on when I was not flying the F4, because once I'm in the F4 I can't easily change the radio frequencies. We're not doing operations that require us to talk to ATC, but occasionally if we get high enough, you'll probably start hearing ATC. Depends on which position we're effectively tuned to and what our altitude is. But my goodness, this scenery is crazy. So I'm flying on PilotEdge. The 1, 2, and 3 aircraft ahead of me are drones. Those were hand recorded about 2 or 3 days ago. Been making some changes to PilotEdge in terms of the multiplayer code for X-Plane, how it interprets the data, the resolution of the clock we use to time everything. The resolution of the data we send out has improved. Those are the changes I've been making over the past 2 to 3 weeks. So as I said, the 1, 2, and 3 aircraft were pre-recorded drones. They were recorded by hand, if that wasn't very obvious by looking at the flight paths. Those are clearly not computer-controlled flight paths. And what I did was I recorded the F4 as the lead. I recorded that solo, and I just had a moving map display using ForeFlight. I plotted out the legs of the military training routes, and I navigated more or less using that moving map display. So I recorded that, and then I played back that drone, and as I was playing it back, I then recorded the number 2 aircraft. And then I played those both back, and then I recorded the number 3 aircraft, and that's how these drones came to pass. So they leave every 15 minutes or so out of Whitby, which is November Uniform Whiskey. There's also the 2 B-1Bs that depart out of Whitby. They start out behind us, but pretty quickly overtake us. I'm just looking right now on ForeFlight, which I have running next to me, to see where the B-1s are. The B-1s are about a mile to our left, and they're just about ready to overtake us. So we will see them as we head down one of these valleys, heading eastbound. We will see them scooting along ahead of us. We'll just see the lights. There they are. Tell you what, I can always rejoin the F-18s later on. Why don't I scoot up ahead and join up with the B-1s. So we'll do a quick supersonic run right here. It is astounding how much back pressure you need when you're supersonic, because the Mach Tuck, there's 1.1. Okay, I'm just watching the Mach number as I transition to idle here. Just as I go subsonic, I'll release the back pressure. Oh, there's a scenery load that's very badly timed. Okay, releasing the back pressure. Now these B1s actually scoot along quite a bit quicker than the other guys. These are doing about 580 in general. Obviously not rolling. They're obviously not rolling as aggressively as the F-18s are in terms of their roll rate, but they do fly a pretty interesting flight path though. So yes, you do see shadows being cast over there. That shadow varies based on the position of the sun. Right now the sun's off our right, that's why those shadows are off to the left of the B-1s. The wing sweep is done dynamically based on the speed of the aircraft, so we don't send the wing sweep number across the network. Instead, the pilot client is taking an educated guess as to whether the wings are swept on an aircraft or not, and it's based on the speed. So the wings start sweeping at about 350 knots over the ground, and then I think the sweeping is complete by the time they get to about 400 knots. That's how I wrote the code 7 years ago. I wrote the code, and at the time we didn't have any animated models. We were using the old X-Plane models. The original CSLs that didn't support animations. So I was writing this data with no way of displaying it. But I knew the day would come where we'd have objects with animations in them. Okay, so I got to retrim the jet for this higher speed. Just a couple of clicks of down trim. Try and give you a look at the side of these B1s. You know, as graceful as the flight path is, it's not that interesting, I think. I don't know. It's good to have a look at the B1s, let's do that. And then I'll transition back. It is a handsome looking airplane, the B1. Alright, that's good for now. The F-18s are behind us. So, 3 is clear, back it up. Just looking at full flight my traffic display. There isn't an easy way for me to include the full flight display in the video, so I just have to take my word for it that they're down here somewhere. Okay, they're starting the right turn here. And tally. 1 o'clock low. There's 2 of them. I think those are the F-18s. Doing 620. So there, there's the 3 of them now. So let's see, they're doing, memory serves about 550, so we're closing at about 70 knots. Start backing it off. 600, 590, 580. We'll bleed a little bit in this turn. 560 and slowing. Okay, adding some power back in, and here we are. The world's the least safest crossover right there. Just doing some waggling left and right here to get 3 in view. Come on, 3. There you go. You got this, buddy. So I basically spent the ages of maybe 9 through 30 envisioning this kind of flying. I started with, I think the first time I got exposed to low-level flying was in F-18 Interceptor on the Amiga 500. And it was a digital joystick, so it had left, right, up and down, but it was either dead center or full aileron or full elevator. There were no kind of degrees in the middle. It was a digital joystick instead of analog, so fine-grained control it was not. But the software was written pretty well. Basically, the longer you held it, held the stick in a given position, the more it would pull, if memory serves. Yeah, it kind of faded the controls in and out when you use the joystick. Anyway, the Amiga was fast, but it wasn't fast enough to run that sim smoothly. And so around the city, where most people would fly it, the frame rate was too low to be able to really appreciate, to get any sense of speed. But if you flew south of San Jose, where there were no more 3D objects, you just had flat land and some dots representing a grid. And it was really low polygon count out there, so the frame rates were actually really good. And the dots on the ground gave you some kind of ground reference to see what your speed was. So that was the very first time I got exposed to low-level flying, and I basically started doing this, but without the graphics and without any other aircraft. But that's where I got an appreciation for the relationship of pitch and roll, and how when you're in a bank, your ability to change pitch is really compromised, and the more you're banking, the less control over the pitch you have. All that stuff. Stuff I just started explaining to my son the other day, because he was asking how to make the plane turn tighter and how to make the nose go up and down when you're in a turn and things like that. So it's kind of fun watching him starting to think through the same things that I worked out when I was a kid. But anyway, that's what I started doing, and I really got the bug for low-level, high-speed flying. And every now and then you'd see a snippet of video on the news or something like that. I used to record all the news clips on back in Australia on the F-18 and things like that, and every now and then you'd get just a nice little segment of 10 to 15 seconds of low-level flying, both from an external view and from inside the cockpit, and that kept me going. But it really wasn't until this week that everything came together, that we got the PilotEdge multiplayer code to the point where you could do 500 knot loose formation flying. I'm not saying it's good enough for really tight formation flying at that speed yet, but for what I'm doing here right now, it's perfectly fluid. So we have that. I have the orthographic scenery showing, I mean, just an incredible view of what this landscape really looks like. I mean, sometimes the resolution of it's not that great when you go over a city and stuff like that, but for like this desert vegetation and stuff like that, it's just bang on. I know it's bang on because just today I found a YouTube video, in fact, of this segment right here, flying over this little island. Someone flying VR1350 and then VR1355 in an F-18. Yeah, that city right there looks pretty bad compared to the real city, obviously, or the real town that's there. We're a little quick here. But anyway, between all the technology coming together, so I've got the right hardware now to be able to do, to have a nice smooth experience in the sim. I have good flight controls, I have orthographic scenery, I have smooth multiplayer aircraft. I can now live out my childhood fantasy, if you like, of low-level, loose formation, high-speed flying. Basically, watching the world go by at 650 to 700 miles an hour is something I would very much like to see. And this is the closest I'm probably going to get to doing it. Traditionally, we have to go through the bridge here between the two levels. Right there. Boom. I'll rejoin the senior citizens over here. It is incredible how much you can learn about formation flying and judging relative motion. You know, even just that break and rejoin right there is just a blast to picture in your head and then make it happen. Scenery loads are less fun, but we deal with them. I've been doing this for a while now, so I'm getting pretty comfortable with it, but when I first started doing it, I was surprised at the difference in workload between, if you just go to fly this route by yourself, the level of difficulty is almost nil. Fly any route, you know, really any path you'd like, for the most part, at any speed you'd like. But when you go to fly it in any kind of formation, where you have to follow these planes in front of you, you're having to follow a particular lateral and vertical path plus a particular speed. The speed is actually changing because it was not flown perfectly, nor was actually trying to maintain a constant speed necessarily. So the difficulty, I've been surprised at how much harder it is to fly these routes in formation compared to just doing it by yourself. So it's been a new challenge because Lord knows I've done a lot of solo low level high speed flying in a sim before. But doing it like this is pretty different. There is really, oh geez. Sorry, my primary display just went black for a minute there. But it's back now. There is no better way to get to know the airplane than flying it at high speed with other planes at 20 to 50 feet off the ground. You can start seeing instantaneous changes in pitch and changes in trim that are required as you change speed, all sorts of stuff. So if anyone's not familiar, hang on a second, let me just see if I can get under this power line. Yep. If anyone's unfamiliar with military training routes, hang on a minute. Darn it. Okay, so what we do is pull the power back, break off from the formation, give them some time to start passing, and then cut back into where they should be, and they should pass left to right. 1, 2, 3. There they go. Let me see. So a military training route is goes through Echo and Gulf airspace for the most part. So it's outside of, it's out of normal special use airspace, like restricted areas, MOAs, controlled firing areas, stuff like that. It's just in regular airspace that you may be flying your GA aircraft through. And I found that fascinating. So as a GA pilot, you actually do want to care about military training routes. But they cover long distances and are flown at various altitudes, and normally they're flown I think down to about 200 feet AGLs, typically as low as they're published down to anyway, at speeds of up to 480 knots. I take some liberties with that on the speed just so I can keep things moving, plus as we've said, I love flying as fast as I can. There is more of a technical challenge the faster you go as well. So I fly it faster and lower than it's actually flown in real world. And so all you do is look on a sectional chart. In this case you'd start at Whidbey, which is November Uniform Whiskey. Look east of that, really a straight shot east. Just as you get into the mountains, you'll see VR, oh sorry I didn't see that power line there. You'll see VR 1350-1351, so it's actually two routes sharing the same segment there. And this heads east for quite some time, and then it turns to the south. And then we join up with VR 1355, which then takes us back to Whidbey, through the Cascades again. It's astonishing the change in topography. I mean, I guess we are doing nearly 10 miles a minute, probably doing about 9 miles a minute since we're doing about 550. So 540 would be 9 miles a minute. But over the course of an hour, we're going to cover 600 miles or so, there and back. And you go from 10,000 foot mountains to desert-like area like this. It's crazy. About as close as you can come to an overshoot without overshooting. You can see the drag profile on the F4 is not right. I mean, I pulled to idle, and I think at 550 over the deck, if you pull to idle, the rate at which you would lose speed, 2's dead, the rate at which you would lose speed would be considerably faster than what we see here in the sim. It's taken me a while to kind of adjust to that. Over the years, they've changed the F4's drag profiles quite a bit. I happen to think the X-Plane 9 F4 was the best they've done so far, but at least for the type of flying I used to like to do, or still like to do. Alright, so 2's dead. Out with the old and in with the new. 3 is now 2. And 4 is now 3. That's me. That's going to be an overshoot for sure. Brake right. Maybe cutting in a little bit early here. Not sure how well this is going to work out. Yeah, I should have let it hang to the right a little bit longer. Oh, we got lucky. The planes kept going straight. Scenery load. So one of the things that this really teaches, I think there's two things. I was thinking about this today. What is the value of flying along like this, other than it being fun and engaging? You get pretty good at judging relative motion. When you fly this low, this fast, and close to other planes, you can see your rate of closure with the terrain very, very easily. So there's a big difference between being perfectly level and descending at any kind of a rate when you're only 20 feet off the ground, 10 feet off the ground, 5 feet off the ground. I mean, you can see what dead level looks like, and you can see what changes in pitch, what effect that has on the path of your jet instantly. You just don't get that when you're flying at higher altitudes. So you get to know the plane very, very well. That's one. And two, see, I managed to look ahead just in time to see that we were going to die if I didn't pull up. I've found that my focus tends to be about 2 to 3 seconds ahead of where the airplane is most of the time. And so that lets me spot situations just in time for the most part. But also seeing the rate of closure with other aircraft and seeing, you know, how fast you're closing on them in terms of forwards and backwards movement, and then left to right movement. Understanding that relationship is really, really fun. So those are things that I've come to learn. Oh, there was one more thing. That's right. I said there were two main topics. So other than relative motion, recovery from unusual attitudes, of all things. So routinely, these jets will cross the top of a ridge and then roll over either on their back, or in many cases only partially onto their back, like they'll do a 130-degree roll or 150-degree roll, because it is much more comfortable for the pilot to pull positive G than it is to push negative Gs to get the nose back down, essentially. So if you're climbing up a ridge, when you get to the top of the ridge, if your goal is to stay as low to the ground as possible to avoid presumably being picked up by radar from the enemy, you need to transition from a climb to a descent very, very quickly as you cross a ridge. And the most efficient way to do that, comfortable way, is to roll the plane over and pull positive G to get the nose back down again. And so very often you'll find yourself flying down the back of a hill upside down. And you have to get really good at the recovery technique, because you're essentially recovering from an unusual attitude, in the traditional GA sense at least, every single time you do one of those maneuvers. So if the time comes where I need to recover a plane from being, you know, diving down Sorry, I'm just braking because of the ATC in the background. I may not include the ATC in the final rendition of the video, I'm not sure yet, but if I end up taking it out and you're wondering why it was I'm pausing in some of the sentences, that's why. It's just in case I leave it in there. So you get very good at recovering from unusual attitudes when you fly like this. At least I think so. So I could look at pretty much any artificial horizon in IMC, whatever it's showing, and get the plane recovered pretty efficiently. You also learn the value of flying smoothly here. I mean, you can ham-fist it through the flight for sure and do fine, but in real life that would be incredibly uncomfortable. Rapid onset of Gs and unloading of the airplane super rapidly would be, I think, very uncomfortable. So bringing on, I mean, doing a high G maneuver is fine, but the onset of G should not be so rapid, I would think, and unloading the airplane should not be so rapid that it's such a shock to the system. At least when I fly my plane in real world and I am setting up for, I mean, I don't think I do anything that honestly pulls more than about 2.5 G, and more realistically it's usually not even more than 2. But even so, I try and bring in the load just slowly, and it's a little hard to articulate exactly why, but I think to the extent that you can fly smoothly, it is a good thing. So I'll frequently try and plan my rollouts and my pitch changes to be able to clear terrain. I'll start the pitch change from quite a way out and do it very gradually and just clear a ridge by, you know, the bare minimum, as opposed to pulling up the last second really hard, probably pulling too much. You would end up pulling a lot of alpha on the jet, which is inefficient, so you lose even more speed that way. That's one reason that you want to fly smoothly too. So it's taught me to do that. Look ahead of the airplane, make the minimal changes to the profile necessary, or to the jet's flight path necessary to get the job done. That was a long, annoying scenery load. There is still nothing that looks better than an F-18 doing yanking and banking ahead of you. Okay, so during all this blabbing that I've done, we have of course transitioned onto V1355 now. We are heading northwest, gradually heading back home towards Whitby. We'll be passing over 2 lakes, a lot of mountainous terrain. The scenery is going to become obscenely beautiful later on, past Glacier Peak, things like that. The F-18 should be around here somewhere behind us. I'll break off to the right here, give them some room. Shadows are getting long in the day here. Sorry, the shadows are getting long at the end of the day, I should say. The Hornet is right around here, according to the traffic displays, so I'm just backing up just a tad more and right on cue. There he goes. Good. Boy, speaking of binary controls, you'd think idle and burner are the only 2 settings I know right now. I'm just not used to the idea of setting the power at such a low point and still doing 500 and something knots. My instinct is to set it up to just a shade under mil power to, you know, to get the job done from years and years and years of doing this. So I frequently end up setting too much power. Oh wow, this is the first time I've flown at sunset over this lake. This is quite the view. Let's have a bug on our windshield. I don't know if anyone can notice that. 6 o'clock low there. This was actually a mistake in the recording. I never intended to fly this far. I was meant to make a right turn just as the lake ended and I didn't do it. So with my tail between my legs, we make a 180 here, look for that road, spot the road, transition to a left turn. This is always a fine line between blacking out and smashing into the mountain. Hornets on the left. Bit of a change in pace. Try some inverted action. The Hornet go again? Oh, I think the Hornet gets slightly misplaced. Yes, it does. So I'm backing up, trying to give it room, but it's never going to come, well, not in the near future, so I'll get back up on the Phantom then. Every now and again I like to roll a bit more aggressively, just to see what the plane can do. Change the profile slightly, but for the most part I usually enter the banks relatively smoothly. We're going way too fast here, so I'm braking off to the left. And at idle, coming back to the right. Phantom should come in on the right. There we go. Okay, the Hornet is nearby. There would be nothing better than sitting on the edge of that road and seeing two F-18s coming screaming over the reservoir there. Gosh, that scenery. So nice. Oh, hello. Nice of you to join us. Kind of stormed ahead of me there. Oh dear. Sorry about that. Looks like it just came skidding around that corner. That was pretty awesome. Wow, that view that Ortho gives with all the trails and roads there, that was pretty cool. The change in lighting over the tops of those fuselages in the turn. The sun's, I think, just being broken up by the trees at the top of the ridgeline. I think that's why it's those that lighting is flickering on and off on the tops of the jets. Pretty neat. This is a really cool display of 3D objects along with ortho scenery. So we have ortho scenery, but we have a real 3D road down there. We have power lines as far as the eye can see. Nice high fidelity 3D power lines, plus the 3D trees. And that is about as real as it's going to get visually. I always fly right behind the Hornets down the center of the lake. Just this once, I want to go on the closer to the road. In the YouTube videos, trust me, the pilots fly a lot more. They tend to gravitate towards the road. Darn it! I wanted to scratch my eye, but we're doing 580 knots. Also, for reference, the military training route is published as a series of relatively long straight lines, but when you watch how they're actually flown, the pilots deviate from the center line of the route quite a bit, and turns out the military training routes are actually quite wide. They're more like an airway. So they don't have to fly along the center of the airway of the military training route the entire time. Alright, we're in the right turn here. Should pass over a lake below us with another lake in the distance. There's the first lake. There's the lake in the distance. Here's a hard left turn. Nope, not yet. Okay, in the original recording I had a hard left turn there, so this is going to be awkward. Alright, I'm at idle. I'm going to widen this out. Then I'll keep the turn going. There they are. Yeah, originally I wanted to come up to this bowl, but I undercooked that turn right there. Recovered, but this sequence took me quite a while to decode from the video of the route being flown. It's just crazy down here. These lakes on the top of this hill like this, unbelievable. How scenic that must be in real life. Okay. Getting onto the tail end of the route here. Watch the power, we're going a little swiftly. The neat thing is, hang on, once you pull the power back and you're turning, it'll bleed quite a bit. That's a hard pull right there. And down the mountain we go. The amount of ground we cover in just an hour is amazing. Oops, sorry, power line. Had a moment of just nothingness there. Has been a long day. I stopped looking at power lines and was only sensing the height of the terrain above me. I wasn't considering the power line at all. That's why we hit the power line but not the ground. If you go to replicate this all on PilotEdge, if you fly and they leave every 15 minutes or so from Arcata. ACV has some drones that fly VR1250, and Whitby, which is November Uniform Whiskey, has drones that leave every 15 minutes as well, like buses. But if you find yourself overshooting, if you don't, if it's happening a lot, rather than having to break off and rejoin, which is a good skill to have, but while you're just getting the hang of this, don't be afraid to just pause it. So you can pause it. If you do a clear overshoot, just pause it, let them fly by you again, and then unpause it and you're good to go. So when you're paused, the drones keep flying in your sim. To give you some reference, again, it's an F4 Phantom. The lead was flown with an F4 Phantom. Full fuel. That roll always cracks me up, how in sync it ended up being. Lead flies, sorry, they're all full fuel, only 300 pound or 400 pound payload. And lead almost never hits the burner, for what it's worth. So it'll go up to mil, and I think there's just a couple of cases where it hits burner, but it's pretty rare. Okay, coming up on Glacier Peak. There is a big scenery load here that happens. Okay, wing, the number 2 plane does hit burner quite a bit more, but the lead does not. Okay, here we go. This is going to be one of the most fun segments in the entire flight. Basically a race down the face of the mountain. So I recommend doing it, seeing how low you can get yourself down the terrain without hitting anything and without overtaking these guys. It's a lot of fun. There's another segment on VR1250. It's actually like that too, just west of the Pyramid Lake, if memory serves. It's nowhere near as steep as that, but it goes on for quite a bit longer. It's really neat. Just a shallow valley along the side of a hill, or canyon on the side of the hill. Rolling for absolutely no good reason other than it was a lazy way of getting my nose down. sure why lead rolls inverted at that point. I think he decided to do some terrain hugging. Slightly short-sighted given that the terrain was so steep. So I voted no on that as 3 and just stayed wings level. Alright, we are just north of Darrington Airport. Military training routes try and avoid GA airports by a couple of miles. So I did the same thing when I recorded this, rather than flying right over the top of Darrington, because it'd be rather rude to anyone in the pattern there. Hello, Hornet. Scenery load. Look at that little lake right on top of a hill like that. It's so nice. Yeah, that scenery load's a problem. My scenery load happened a lot faster than it did on the when the drones were being recorded. I think they're going to come from right to left here. I'm really hoping. Yep, there we go. So having them show up in full flight is nice too. Oh, that's a pretty view. Okay, nearly at the tail end of the route here. So there'll be one more pass over a lake, and that little dome over there I think is where we end the route. Oh, we're doing 620. That's not good. Tell you what, cross over here. Whip back around here. And hopefully there they blow. There we go. Okay, so there'll be a quick wing waggle, or maybe no wing waggle. Nope, just a pull up. Bring the power in. Actually, we'll go to burner now. And they looks like they climb up at 75 degrees. 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet. Come off the burner. Roll it over. Burner back on. Slow pull. 15.5, 16, 16.5, 17, rolling out. And there you have it. VR1355. Honestly, I'm too exhausted to fly back to Whitby and do the recovery. That's not the fun part of this anyway. So that was VR1350 and VR1355 flown in this thing. That's what's flying right now. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Encourage you to give it a try sometime. Again, just show up at Whitby, November Uniform Whiskey. Park on the north ramp or on runway 7. It's essentially non-towered for us, so do whatever you like. And wait on average 7.5 minutes, because they leave every 15 minutes. And look for F-18s, F4s and B-1Bs.